Welcome to another video. We are going to briefly go over 10 myths. No, let's make it 7. 7 myths. Can you tell that I didn't write a script and I just am winging this thing? Seven myths about purgatory that I had to encounter, and this comes from questions that I asked about purgatory when I was a Protestant trying to figure this out, because obviously purgatory was like a big purgatory and indulgences. I was like, as a Reformed Protestant, I was basically like, you heretics, how dare you? How dare you hold to a belief system that I don't understand and I'm not willing to look at? And then I was eventually willing to look at it. So, myth number 1. Purgatory is a second chance at heaven. False. Purgatory is for the purification of those already saved. 1 Corinthians 3:15. Salvation is assured but requires sanctification. Hebrews 12:14. This does have Jewish roots. The concept of purification aligns with the Jewish practices of atonement, such as the Yom Kippur, where the faithful seek complete reconciliation with God. Leviticus 16. Now, complete reconciliation is very important there, because obviously we are reconciled to God through Christ, our mediator, right now, but you are still sinful, are you not? Okay, very good. Number 2, purgatory is an eternal punishment. No, purgatory is temporary. In fact, we don't even know that it's a time thing, place, or otherwise. The church makes no statements on it, or I should say, no dogmatized statements on it. Theorizes. It ends when the soul is purified. Matthew 5:26, Luke 12:59. Jewish tradition includes the idea of temporary purification after death, as seen in rabbinic teachings about Gehenna, where souls are cleansed before entering paradise. Again, we are Judaism fulfilled. This theme continues on. So, myth number 3. Purgatory is not biblical. The truth and biblical support actually comes from 2 Maccabees 12, 1 Corinthians 3, Revelations 21. The Bible does support the purification after death. I would also just quickly nudge in there, when you hear 2 Maccabees, if you're a Protestant, don't freak out. It's just a book that the apostles also used. Okay. So prayers for the dead, actually, in Jewish tradition, like those mentioned in 2 Maccabees, imply belief in the process of purification. So this is not something that's... to quickly counteract the idea that purgatory is a made-up concept by the Catholic Church. It's not true. It has Jewish roots. Purgatory is myth number 4. Sorry, purgatory is a physical fire. Again, we don't make speculation upon these things. The purification process is described symbolically in 1 Peter 1:7. The church does not define the nature as physical fire, though. Fire is often used in Jewish scriptures and our scriptures as a metaphor for purification. You can see Malachi 3, verse 2 and 3. Myth number 5. Purgatory denies Christ's sufficiency. This is probably a big one, a big stickler, because I just saw James White talking about this one. It's a myth. Purgatory applies the grace of Christ's sacrifice to cleanse the remaining imperfections. This aligns with Paul's teaching on sanctification in Philippians 2:12. The Day of Atonement involved rituals to cleanse the community, even after receiving forgiveness for their sins, Leviticus 16. So again, read Leviticus 16, and you'll understand the fulfillment through Christ's sufficient work on the cross, not insufficiency. Myth number 6. Purgatory is a medieval invention. We already went over this. It's not. It has major Jewish roots. Early church fathers like St. Augustine, Gregory the Great, discussed purification after death, drawing for the biblical and Jewish traditions in Job 1 and 2 Maccabees, as we mentioned previously. Myth number 7, and the final myth before we move on to some extracurriculars. Purgatory is unnecessary because we are saved by faith alone. Salvation involves faith and works, James 2:24, Revelations 14:13. Purgatory purifies the saved who are not yet perfected, Hebrews 12:23. So it's not unnecessary, because even if it's instant, even if it's an instant moment, or even if it's a thing outside of time, even if it's not a physical fire that purifies you, even though, like, there's multiple. Jesus says it multiple times. It could be physical fire. It doesn't remove the fact that you cannot go into heaven unholy. So at some point you have to be made holy. So that's all this is. Again, the concept of deeds and repentance is affecting the afterlife is deeply rooted in Jewish thought. Ecclesiastes 12, Sirach 7, and then Paul, reiterates this by saying in Romans when he says that you were, according to your works, will you be judged by the Father. So let's make a detailed reference point for scriptures related to purgatory. So 1 Corinthians 3:15 we mentioned. Paul's metaphor of fire testing the quality of each person's work reflects a purification process distinct from eternal condemnation. This aligns with the doctrine of purgatory as a place of cleansing for those destined for heaven. If anyone's work is burnt up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. The Greek word for fire here is, that it's being used is often symbolic of God's judgment or purifying presence. In this context, it refers to a spiritual cleansing rather than a destructive punishment, though. The phrase suffer loss translates and implies a forfeiture or a purging of unworthy works. So you have your unworthy works and your worthy works, and it's forfeiting, it's purging these things, right? The nuance here highlights that the individual is saved, but undergoes a process of refinement as gold is perfected, as Christ says. So in 2 Maccabees, we have, therefore he made atonement for the dead, so that they may be delivered from their sin. So the word atonement in Greek, to propitiate or to appease, this term often refers to sacrificial offerings for remission of sins, specifically. And then the phrase delivered from their sins, litrosis, means redemption or liberation, which implies that the dead can be freed from the temporal effects of sin through intercession and sacrifice, giving it that temporal idea. Malachi 3, 2 verse 2 and 3. The prophetic imagery of the purification connects to the purgatorial process of being refined for entrance into God's presence. It emphasizes God's holiness and the necessity of cleansing before standing before him. For he is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. Here's what's really interesting, right? Fuller's soap, borit, in Hebrew, refers to an ancient cleaning agent used to whiten garments, symbolizing purity. The imagery aligns with the concept of souls being cleansed to appear spotless before God. Matthew 5:26, Jesus teaching about the reconciliation before judgment, suggests that unresolved temporal debts must be addressed. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Get out of what? Get out of what? Get out of what? So, and by the way, Condrentes, which I think that's the word for it. I'm going off memory. For penny, there is just the smallest Roman coin, so it's like even this tiny small debts had to be purified. But the phrase "never get out," a strong double negative, emphasizing the necessity of restitution. So, what are your thoughts? Did you believe any of these myths? Because I definitely did when I was a Protestant. And check out the next video that we're going to do on the myths of indulgences.